So you've learned some Spanish, enough to create sentences and make yourself understood a lot of the times, which is fantastic. Felicidades. But you're still struggling to understand when Spanish speakers are speaking to you. Yeah, I know how frustrating that can be. But even though listening comprehension can seem more out of our control than our speaking, it is still a skill that can be trained. And I'll show you exactly how to do it in today's video. Comencemos, amigos. Hola mis queridos líderes del lenguaje, bienvenidos al canal, yo soy Erika. I'm a former Spanish interpreter turned Spanish teacher and language coach, now living and loving life abroad here in Mexico. I've had the immense privilege of helping hundreds of Spanish learners in my online programs over the past 5+ years go from nervous small talk to heartfelt conversations with family, friends, and members of their community. So if that is what you are striving to do, don't hesitate to hit that subscribe button and that bell so you don't miss a thing. Let me start by saying that I know exactly how it feels to be listening to Spanish and be completely lost. My story in a nutshell, I started from zero, meaning that I didn't grow up with the language, I didn't grow up with that exposure, I didn't have any native Spanish-speaking family members. But fast forward a few years after I did start learning, and I was working as a medical interpreter, which required a really high level of listening skills for obvious reasons. So what I'm going to share with you is really what I did to get from A to B, and also what is continuing to work wonders for my students nowadays. Improving your listening comprehension comes down to 3 things. How you work with pre-recorded material, that's something you can do on your own. How you handle real-life interactions, and a healthy dose of patience, because it is a process. So let's start by talking about pre-recorded materials, because spoiler alert, if you didn't know, I'm about to tell you, input is king. It is so important to be listening to and reading Spanish every day, continuously, across every stage of your Spanish learning journey. Today, we'll focus in more on the listening part. So when you're working with pre-recorded materials, what type of Spanish should you listen to? This is a great time to determine whether or not you want to focus on the Spanish from a particular region. Now, while Spanish is Spanish and Spanish speakers generally all understand each other, there are notable differences in accents, some vocabulary words, and some idiomatic expressions. So if you live in a Spanish-speaking country, or you have family or friends that are from a particular region, it may make sense to start there. Now, it's not crucial to do so. For example, I didn't intentionally pick any kind of Spanish region when I was starting to learn Spanish, but I would say that probably 75% of my Spanish-speaking friends were from Mexico. So I naturally did absorb a lot of Mexican Spanish, but I was still around people and was still listening to Spanish from all over Latin America, and even a few from Spain, but mostly Latin America. And I'm grateful for that broader exposure because it did help me understand right from the beginning and not be intimidated by the variety that does exist in Spanish. But if you are finding yourself struggling with listening comprehension, then choosing a certain region, choosing a certain focus can be very beneficial to you. And once you're more confident, breaking out into the Spanish from other regions will be easier. It's all still Spanish, just with a unique flavor. Now that you've chosen what to listen to, how do you go about listening? Again, right now we're talking about with pre-recorded material. Students often ask, what should I listen to? Should I take notes or just listen passively? Should I look up words or just learn them over time in context? What about Spanish shows and movies? They go so fast that I can't understand much, so is that even worth my time? Those are great questions. And let me tell you, you don't need to consume Spanish in the exact same way all the time. Your approach will depend on your focus and what you're trying to accomplish at that moment. Let me explain. You'll want to use focused listening with your pre-recorded material when your main goals are to increase your vocabulary, which is essential for a good listening comprehension, as well as improve your listening comprehension within certain context. So for this, you'll want to use comprehensible input. Comprehensible input is material that you can understand, you can get the overall idea of, but it still contains new elements that you can learn from. So it can't be too hard or too easy. And ideally, you'll be working with something that has both the audio and the text. So for example, a podcast or a story that comes with a transcript, or an ebook that also has an audio element, or a video with accurate captions. I'll link a playlist of many Spanish comprehension videos that I've done on this channel here above, but feel free to use any material that fits your level and your interest. Once you have your material, follow these 5 easy steps. Listen to a short piece, a short snippet. How short will depend on you. It could be 30 seconds, it could be a couple of minutes. And listen to that video or audio multiple times without any captions, without looking at the transcript. See what you can get out of it just simply using your ear and the multiple repetitions. This is excellent ear training. Then listen again, now using the captions or the transcripts or whatever you have in written form. And you're going to be able to understand more this time. One, because you're looking at the words, you're going to see things that you missed just hearing it. You're going to notice cognates, so words that look the same, both in English and Spanish. They may not have sounded the same, really, but they look the same. So you're going to recognize those words now. Step 3, make a note of some of those important words or phrases that you missed. You don't have to overwhelm yourself with this. If there were many words or phrases that you missed, maybe just choose a few of them. Make a note of this new vocabulary that you've learned. Number 4, investigate the meaning of the new vocabulary. Some things you might just have picked up by reading it and just through the context, but what you couldn't, go ahead and look that up. You can use wordreference.com, SpanishDictionary.com, ChatGPT. There are several options, but avoid just putting the entire text or just entire paragraphs into the translator. Just look up the parts that you didn't understand and then make the effort yourself to now deduce the meaning of the overall paragraph or sentence or whatever it was through the context. This is essential for helping you build those real-life listening comprehension skills for the real world. Step 5, listen to that original audio or video again without the captions, without the transcript, and let what you just learned marinate in the entire context of the audio or video. This is so important, but it's the most overlooked step because most people listen to something or read something, look up new words, and move on. And they don't let it marinate. But when you revisit that material after having learned the new vocabulary, the new phrases, and you look at it again, or you hear it again in its original context, that's going to strengthen your brain's ability to recognize and retain those elements. Hearing them again within the natural context of the audio helps your brain relate that new information to the overall idea of the audio, which you had understood from the beginning. But now you have those new elements and you're able to see how they all mingle together. That helps to transfer that new information to your long-term memory. So that's focused listening with pre-recorded materials. Another thing that you can do is extensive listening with pre-recorded materials. So you'll use extensive listening when your goal is to more passively adapt your brain to how Spanish sounds in real life, how it's spoken, and expose yourself to as many words as possible. You don't need to understand every word. This is kind of your time to sit back, a little bit relax without so much focus and soak it all in. This is going to help you pick up on the speed and the intonation and just get used to how Spanish is spoken in the real world. So for this, pick something that you just enjoy. This is your time for watching Netflix. You may even choose to watch something that you've seen before in English. That's okay. But now you're listening in Spanish, and since you're not lost on the plot, you've already seen it, you can just focus on how certain thoughts are being transmitted in Spanish. I would really suggest not using English subtitles for this because our brain defaults to doing whatever is easiest, and it's going to be a lot easier for you to just read the English than actually listen to the Spanish. You can't really do both at the same time, but feel free to put on the Spanish captions if that helps you follow along. Now, do keep in mind that if you're watching something that is not originally in Spanish, it's very likely that the Spanish captions and what you're hearing, the spoken Spanish, is not going to match. So keep that in mind. And when you want to use the Spanish captions, I would suggest going for a movie or a show that was originally in Spanish. And interestingly enough, what I found is that movies and shows that are dubbed, like from English, for example, into Spanish, have a clear Spanish audio, which can be great if you need that, but does take a little bit away from just that natural native Spanish speaking that I tend to hear more when I'm watching something that was originally in Spanish. So when you want to challenge yourself, go for an original movie or show in Spanish. And of course, just audio only, like podcasts and radio, work just fine for extensive listening as well. Just be sure to choose a topic you enjoy, since you won't have the extra added fun of seeing the visuals as well. No need to pause and look up words here. Just focus on the intonation, the rhythm, and the flow of the language. Now let's talk about real-life interactions. While pre-recorded material is wonderful, you can't hide behind the scenes all the time. You do need that spontaneity that comes with real human interactions. So here's how to make the most of them. Don't be afraid to admit that you're learning. Estoy aprendiendo español y algunas palabras me cuestan. Use clarification phrases and learn a variety of them. Don't always just say, repite por favor. You can say other things like, ¿qué significa eso? ¿Puedes repetirlo más despacio? ¿Puedes decirlo de otra forma? Lo siento, no entendí bien. Let them know what you understood and then what you didn't quite catch so that they know that you're following along. You're just having some trouble at a certain spot and they just need to explain that part again. I have a whole video about this, which I'll link somewhere around this video so that you can learn many more clarification phrases like that to get you out of sticky situations. Leverage context clues. Pay attention to tone, gestures, and just the overall context. For that reason, it is easier to understand someone when you can see them rather than when you're talking on the phone. Shift focus temporarily. If you're feeling overwhelmed and it feels appropriate to do so, you can gently steer the conversation to a topic that you're more familiar with. For example, if your coworker is talking to you about all the nitty-gritty details of exactly what her son did during this soccer game, but you're just kind of getting lost because you're unfamiliar with all the words, maybe you can just kind of shift it and say, wow, ¿y cuánto tiempo lleva jugando fútbol? Right? How long has he been playing soccer? You're still on the general topic, and the person probably won't even notice that you got a little lost, and the conversation can continue just as it was, increasing your overall confidence and the confidence that that person has while speaking to you. I've done it many times. It works. This is huge. You can practice responding to your nervousness. Make yourself nervous on purpose, but while you're in a more controlled situation. So practice role-playing challenging scenarios that commonly are coming up for you with your teacher or coach. Our private clients in my program, Elevate Spanish Accelerator, do that routinely. That way they practice how to handle moments of confusion calmly. Learn to laugh at mistakes. Mistakes are a natural and necessary part of learning. Responding with humor or a smile can just ease the tension and keep the conversation moving forward. And try to end on a positive note. If a conversation just feels really challenging, you can end by telling your speaking partner, gracias por ser paciente conmigo. It's just a nice way to acknowledge the effort on both of your parts. Finally, you have to learn to be patient. Just like speaking, listening comprehension evolves in stages. Stage 1 is when you're able to understand slow, clear speech with learner-friendly materials. At stage 2, you're following along with familiar topics at a pretty natural pace. Stage 3, you're even able to catch a lot of Spanish when it's spoken faster or with certain regional accents. And stage 4, you can keep up even with native speakers speaking amongst themselves at natural speed. Each stage builds on the last, so celebrate your wins and trust the process. Those are my tips for you today, guys. Hopefully they have been helpful, but I bet that you don't just want to listen, you also want to improve your speaking abilities, and that is what I focus on in my masterclass, Accelerate to Confident Conversation. You can register and join for free at the link below or go to ericaraylanguage.com/90days. Keep at it, mis queridos líderes del lenguaje. You got this. Hasta la próxima.